Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Mish Minute. I'm your host, Logan Mish. Today we have a very special guest, longtime ESPN legend and host of the Dan Patrick Show on Peacock, Dan Patrick himself. Dan, thank you for joining us.
Well, I've been waiting for the invitation, so thank you.
I'm glad. So everyone has their start and decides what they want to be. A lot of kids will say 100 different things. How did you decide that you wanted to be a sportscaster?
I don't know if I decided. It kind of decided for me. I just knew at age 12 that I wanted to do something with sports, and I was obsessed with stats, and I didn't know how to get in the business, but I knew I wanted to do something sports related, and I thought I was going to end up doing radio, and then I was lucky to get a job in TV, but I didn't have a fallback plan. I didn't have a plan B. This is all I knew how I could do it or that I wanted to do it. It was just a question of, how it was going to happen, how it was going to unfold.
Right. Well, my parents try to stay realistic with me. How did yours react when you started telling them you wanted to solely get into the sports business?
I don't think they reacted. I think they just were like, okay. Because back then, nobody knew how to do this. You were kind of like, oh, you're going to be a sportscaster. How do you do that? I don't know. Because you got to get a job to prove that you can do it. And that was the big hurdle is, can I get a job in the business? And I was fortunate because I ended up renting out TV equipment and then videotaping me doing 5 minutes of sports. So I ad-libbed 5 minutes of sports, had it on a tape, and then I was shopping that around to any of the local TV stations in Dayton, Ohio. And I was lucky that the Channel 2 station in Dayton hired me. They didn't pay me, but they hired me to do interviews with the Bengals and the Reds. But at least I was in the door. I always tell students, get in the door. Then you're going to hear about jobs. Then you get an opportunity. But there was no direct path to do this for a living. It was just, if somebody's willing to give you a chance, then great. And I was lucky that I got a chance.
What were your biggest takeaways from your first job in radio?
Radio was easy because you don't have to worry about how you look. And, when somebody says you got a face for radio, it's like, okay, I'm fine with that. I have a voice for radio, but I made mistakes, but, at the time I didn't really care. I just like, all right, that's part of the business. You're going to make mistakes. Most of our students, we want you to make your mistakes on campus, or you're going to make mistakes when you go out for your first job that might be in a really, really small market. I was in Dayton, Ohio, and that was a top 50 market. You're going to make mistakes, and more people are going to see it and hear it. Right. That was something that you have to kind of get used to, but it's nowhere near what it is now because there was no social media. And I didn't worry about what somebody was saying because I didn't know what they were saying.
Mm-hmm. Right. So did you ever get any bad letters in the mail or something?
No, not that I'm aware of, but maybe they kept them from me, but I didn't get any fan mail, either. So I guess I was pretty average at what I was doing.
Right. Now let's fast forward a bit to after you finished college. Now, you first started off at WNEP TV in Scranton coming out of college. What were your biggest takeaways from that job?
Well, my biggest takeaway from that job is that I never worked in Scranton.
Really?
No.
What was your first job coming out of college?
Aren't you doing the research?
Yes. I researched WNEP TV over in Scranton.
In Scranton?
In Scranton.
No. I worked for Dunder Mifflin in Scranton. I worked at the paper company there.
Right. Let's fast forward a bit more then.
So you did your research?
I did. I researched, and it said your first job coming out of college was WNEP TV over in Scranton.
No.
No. Oh, boy. Okay.
You got to fire your researcher.
I have to fire myself, apparently.
Yeah.
All right. Gonna cut that out. Wow.
No, we're leaving that in.
We're leaving that in?
Yes.
Ah,
Yes.
well done.
Gonna leave that in.
all right. So apparently, since I did not find the correct place, coming out of college, how did you manage to land your first job?
I just wouldn't go away. I was persistent. I knew I wanted to do it. Question is, I had to convince my boss that he wanted me to do it, and that wasn't easy. But looking back on it, I was very naive to understand the business. And it's probably a good thing because I wouldn't take no for an answer. But, you know, when you're in Scranton, Pennsylvania, you know, you just have to make the best of it.
Right. So moving from your humble beginnings over in radio and small local television, how did you manage to land an occupation over at ESPN?
Oh, that's a long story. I was trying to get the weekend job in Dayton, Ohio, and I didn't get it. And I remember going to Atlanta to visit a friend, and she said they're hiring at CNN. And I went there, and I stayed there for five and a half years. And then my contract was up, and I called the guy who had started SportsCenter, or was largely instrumental in starting SportsCenter, John Walsh. And I said, "Do you know who I am?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "You're interested in hiring me?" And he said, "Yes." And that was a Friday. I flew up on a Tuesday and took the job, and then was at ESPN for 18 years after that.
What were the early days of ESPN like for you?
They were fun. I mean, they should be fun. And you had Chris Berman and Bob Lee and Tom Mees, the founding fathers of ESPN. And but it was an old school environment. You know, guys had been there for a while. I was coming in from CNN, and but every night you were having fun. I mean, it was hard not to have fun.
Right. What was probably the most fun interaction over at ESPN that you had?
Oh, I think when you're in the newsroom on a nightly basis, it's just, you're talking sports, guys were betting, there was fantasy leagues, it was, and everybody went out together. If you go out after the show, there was a lot of camaraderie with it. And that, you look forward to going to work because they were your friends.
Now for this next question, this one I definitely know is correct with my research, mainly because Gus has also said it a few times to me. How did you get the catchphrase, dare I say, en fuego?
This was back when the Rockets had Sam Cassell, and they were playing in the NBA Finals, and I remember that Marv Albert would say that somebody was on fire. Everybody was on fire. And I kept thinking, maybe what's the Spanish interpretation for on fire? And I had a cameraman who said, it's El Fuego. So I'm doing the highlights. We go to commercial break. Cameraman says it's El Fuego. Came back, I was doing highlights. I said somebody was El Fuego. That means they're the fire, not en fuego, on fire. And then I eventually heard from a Spanish teacher in Pennsylvania. And she said, I think you mean to say somebody is en fuego instead of el fuego. And that was it. I was just, you do so many highlights, you're just trying to have fun and entertain yourself, entertain the camera people. And I just started from there. That occasionally I would say, dare I say, en fuego. And, when you do catchphrases, you got to be careful of not overusing them. But we did them almost to add a little more excitement to highlights that weren't exciting. And if you're doing a Cavaliers-Bucks highlight and you throw in somebody's en fuego, or you can't stop them, you can only hope to contain them, all that is just to kind of spice up the highlight a little bit and have some fun with it.
Right. You probably had many catchphrases over your time working over at SportsCenter and ESPN. What catchphrase have you scrapped? What was your least favorite catchphrase you ever came up with?
I didn't have that many. because it became almost, I don't know, the norm that people thought you had to have a catchphrase to be a sportscaster. And then we started to kind of mock the sportscaster who had to have a catchphrase. And we were kind of throwing out silly things. So after a while, you kind of stopped doing it because everybody was doing it. And then it was just, it got silly. And decided that we were going to be counter to what everybody else was doing. We had created this mess, and then we wanted to get as far away from it as possible.
Sometimes when you create it, you just need to out it. So driving from broadcasting to your acting career, how did you originally get into theatrics?
Theatrics?
Or acting?
Or theater?
Theater.
Well, it wasn't Scranton. Didn't have it there. I ran into Adam Sandler, and he had somebody who didn't show up for a role in Happy Gilmore. And then I said, if you ever need a sportscaster, you let me know. And then he said, I'm going to put you in my next movie, and you're going to play a police officer. Well, his next movie was Little Nicky, and I wasn't in that movie. And then after that, he did The Water Boy, and I was myself in The Water Boy. And then I did The Longest Yard, where I play a police officer. And I think there were 5 movies that I played a police officer. And then Sandler's, I think I've been in 20 or 21 of his movies. I'm in Happy Gilmore too. And
were you the same police officer or a different one every time?
a different one because the script was different. But, your Sandman will put you in a movie, and he always would carve out a little bit of the script for me, and he has me as a sportscaster in Happy Gilmore too.
Right. So how do you just run into Adam Sandler?
I was at the Knicks game, and it was halftime, and I just walking around a corner, and I saw him. He was sitting by himself, and I just said, hey, Sandman. And then he was like, Danny P. And I said, how you doing? And then he told me the story, and then that's when I said, if you need me, let me know, and we've been friends ever since.
So I watched the trailer for the Happy Gilmore 2 for the first time last night after hearing you were in it. How did you feel not being presented in it?
Oh, I'm not a big name.
No?
No. Look at the people who are in it. Did you look at the people who were in it?
I saw some of them, yes.
Okay.
A lot of big names. It's a lot of Adam Sandler movies.
Yeah, so I'm just somebody who's in the movie. He's trying to sell a movie. He's not using me as the Trojan horse to go through the castle here to have people watch this. You got a lot of professional golfers in it. You got Travis Kelce in it. So believe me, I didn't know I wasn't in the trailer, and I'm not worried about it.
Yeah, fair enough. So where did you get the idea to, moving on to something that's about here, where did you get the idea to start the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting?
I got tired of parents coming up and saying that their son or daughter knows sports and they want to be a sportscaster. How did they do it? And I met somebody whose son went to an SEC school, graduated, and thought he was going to get a job. And I was honest. I said, you're not going to get a job. You have no experience. You have to do internships. You have to put in the work. And I was thinking of doing something on my own where I would just have students send me their videotapes and I would critique them. And then my partner, Reed Bergman, knew of Full Sail, knew sort of what they were all about, and they didn't have anything like this. I met with the people here, and we came up with a curriculum, and I brought in Gus Ramsey, who I'd worked with at ESPN, and it's been most rewarding thing that I've ever done, because you're changing lives with students graduating and getting jobs in the business, and your major is sportscasting. And something I know a little bit about but we're also giving you the answers to the test, and then you can get jobs. And that's, you're changing lives, and that was important. I wanted people to get an opportunity to understand how to get in the business, something that I knew nothing about when I was trying to do it.
Right. So why did you originally choose Gus Ramsey to head your sportscasting program?
Well, I think that he had educational background. His father was an educator. He had a great demeanor about, he could be firm, but he was also fair. And if you're dealing with students, could he be that person who was dealing with these students on a daily basis? And there was nobody else. In fact, I told the powers that be at Full Sail, if you don't hire Gus, then I don't want to do this. I was that confident in him because I knew that he would be great at being understanding while also expecting and demanding. And that's what you need. Parents are spending good money to send their students, their kids here to be students. And I wanted those parents to know that we were going to make sure that we did our part. And I knew Gus being here every day was the right person.
Right. So why was Full Sail originally the choice?
It was the only choice. But it's just, we did the research, and the fact that it was well known in certain industries, sound, with movies, with music, and they seemed aggressive in let's try this, because nobody else was doing what we were doing. You have other great broadcasting journalism schools, but we had a degree in sportscasting, and that was going to separate us. And when you get here, we're going to put you on camera. Like you start out, you're not waiting like you would at other schools. You have an opportunity right away. And we thought that gave our students a significant advantage on other universities.
Right. Jumping over a little bit back to your television career, you, according to NBC Sports, you announced that you're going to be retiring from the Dan Patrick School or Dan Patrick Show in 2027. Why 2027?
That was enough. I've been in the business for 40 years, a little over that. And you want to make sure that you go out on top. You want to make sure you're still doing it at a high level. And there's other things I want to do. But yeah, it was after the Super Bowl in Atlanta, then I'll retire. But my career started in Atlanta at CNN, and we thought full circle, you can retire there after the Super Bowl.
After you're retired, do you plan to be more active within the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting?
Yeah. Because we're looking at tapes once a month where students submit tapes, whether they're online or on campus, and we get to critique those and give you feedback, because that's the most important thing, is that we are constantly helping you. Depending on your level of need, we'll be there for you. You want to submit tapes every month, then we'll look at those and critique those. And that's important because it's about the student's growth.
Mm-hmm. Do you plan to make any major changes to the Dan Patrick School of Sportscasting once you do retire from the show?
That's 3 years. A lot can happen. I think what I like about Full Sail is that if we want to add a course, change a course, drop a course, we can do that. We don't have to go through what most universities have to go through. And this world is ever changing. We've had esports, you've had podcasting, there's radio, there's TV. Who knows what the next medium is going to be, where it's the new thing. Well, you have to be able to adapt and give the students what they want. And if we can be ahead of the game or be in the game and kind of adapt to what students are curious about, then that's really, really important. We don't have all the answers, but we're willing to find all the answers. And I think some universities lock in with their curriculum, and they don't change. But we want to change with the times, and to have that ability to not go through all the red tape is very important.
Right. Now, for a final question to satiate my hunger and most of the people in my class's curiosity, how did your brackets look after the NCAA championship wrapped up?
Well, first of all, congratulations on Satiate. You spent time on Satiate, but not on what happened in Scranton. My brackets went as well as my career in Scranton. Not well at all. But, you know, I think the more you know, the worse you do with the brackets. It's the people who don't know much. They usually, hey, I like that mascot, or I like the colors of that team. That's why I usually don't do well in the bracket challenge. I overthink it.
Right. Well, I guess we both have the same issue. Thank you, Dan, for joining me.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. For the Mish Minute, I'm Logan Mish. This has been Dan Patrick. Have a good one.